sat in my dorm and I looked at literary politics, I asked this simple question. Why in 1968-69 am I only reading County Cullen, Langston Hughes? I mean, who was writing in Missouri? you know, and what happened, I began to realize, wow, it's literary politics, in terms of how literature gets to us. And here are people who are fortunate to know Jesse Foss or Du Bois and get their poems in the Crisis and Opportunity magazine. And so what happens for me, I became a writer, but I also said I want to be involved in every aspect of writing. And I saw in Washington back then, many African American writers had no outlets in terms of publishing outlets. And I tried to do something about that by creating the Essential Poetry Reading Series. But then I also hooked up with my friend Thomas Bolton, who just passed away a couple of years ago. He was the first African American that I met who introduced himself as a publisher. When we sat around at Howard's campus, decided we were going to make literature, and many of the things that we projected back in the early 70s, it's here now. I mean, we were talking about science fiction writers before there was Octavia Butler. I have the documentation in terms of one guy who was putting out the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction Writers who told me in a letter there were no black science fiction writers. And I had discovered Samuel Delaney and Jesse Miller and a number of other writers. But we were very much, Thomas and I, very much trying to shape the literary thing and look at things in the future. Essex Hemphill, who was one of the last writers in the North Anthology, met him when he was at University of Maryland and promoted his work because I knew back then that there was going to be important black gay writers. And you have to be an advocate for that. I remember when the Smithsonian didn't want to have like Michelle Parkinson and Essex Hemphill. And so you have to go in there as a writer and not just simply write in your room. You have to say, okay, I have to change this literary landscape because I'm not just dealing with literature, I'm dealing with culture and politics.
Now, that sounds like you just went in and did it. How hard was it for you to get people writing, for you to get people published, and for you to move that rock, which was so hard at that time?
You get good practice being at Howard University, historically black college. If you want to know about obstacles of blackness, all you got to do is go to some of these Negro institutions. Because what happens is that, I came on Howard's campus when the university was changing from pretty much a Negro institution to a point where people were talking about a black university. And so when I mention people like John Killens and Stephen Henderson and even Sterling Brown, we honor those people. But those people received opposition, from what they believed in their work. I will never forget, being in the car in front of Founders Library, sitting next to Julian Mayfield, who was let go by the university. Sitting next to this individual was crying, and people not realize who he was. Or looking at Leon DeMont, one of the fathers of niggitude, walk across the campus, and people not know who he was. So I saw the obstacles there in terms of dealing at Howard. So that prepared me for dealing with any opposition in terms of the publishing industry, and being around people like Amos and Gold and others who really felt that, okay, we can create alternatives. And people like Haki Madhubuti, alternatives to existing structures. We had models.
I want to hear a little bit more about those models. Who were your heroes? You mentioned Langston Hughes, you mentioned Sterling Brown, but who were your heroes, political and literary? And I'm talking from boyhood or from that early part of Howard University.
I'll give you my list of heroes. I mean, they're interesting assortment of people. Sandy Koufax, I begin with him. Growing up, I wanted to take Clete Boyer, who used to play third base for the Yankees. Okay, I got the sports people. Still fascinated by Roberto Clemente. When I left the South Bronx to come to Washington, D.C., I only packed about 1 or 2 books. Stokely Carmichael's Black Power. I'm very impressed by that. Marshall McLuhan. I mean, if you talk about a person that influenced me, Marshall McLuhan. I was also very fascinated by Robert McNamara and J. Edgar Hoover. That's why I keep files on everybody. And when I say that is that I was always looking at various different people. My whole approach to literature is almost based on a sports model. When people talk about me promoting young writers, I look at young writers like, I guess, the Baltimore, farm system. Do we have a good pitcher? Is Abdul going to pitch some no-hitters, in the next couple of years? Is Edward Donnicott going to win a Nobel Prize in 15, 25 years from now? I'm looking at those type of things in terms of, one, trying to support those individuals and make sure that they don't have obstacles, you see. But I had a number of heroes. June Jordan was a model for me for many years in terms of just what it meant to be a political writer. Amisu Bolton, as I mentioned, because I don't want his name to fall through the cracks of history. Arthur P. Davis. You see, when you talk about Howard University, and if you talk about Sterling Brown, I was closer to Arthur P. Davis, you know. I was a leading critic, you know. And so these are people that I looked up to. Now, who made me strong? I would have to say my two wives. Michelle Calhoun and my present wife, Denise King Miller. Especially Denise, when she saw me, she said, "What? You're just too soft." So she sort of beefed me up. People who know my wife know that. She's a really tough person. And so, I mean, I don't want to look at the hero thing in terms of just anointing it, but and so many people I feel have touched my life. And right now, as I look at writing the second memoir, you know, I'm looking at my son and my daughter as key people that I really inspire, and I look at how they've been heroes to me.